So, old school university. What was it like back in the day when I went to university? So, if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massack. I'm Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. And I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people that help me out, and I want to pay the favor forward to help you out. So, I'm 40, I don't know what I'm 42 years old at this moment, right? So I was born in 1979. Oh my gosh. At this point, I could probably be some of your dads. And that's a little bit of a scary thought for me, but university was not that long ago for me. I did a lot of university, but my undergraduate education really still sticks with me. It's from 1998 to 2003, and I remember a lot of it. This is when computers were just coming into play in terms of people were having computers. It was still a new thing for people to actually buy computers and bring them into their house. I spent $5,000 on my computer, and it was clunky and it took a long time to load up and it was really slow. Dial-up was still a thing at that moment. There's lots of sort of things. And how we wrote research papers and how we did work is we often had to go to the library to read different things. But it was just starting where we can look up information on the internet and all of that kind of stuff. So we're just starting to do that kind of stuff. But the web pages were not that great. Individual people were making web pages. Facebook didn't exist. The internet as you know it, the sort of stylized notion of the internet with YouTube and all that kind of stuff didn't exist at that point. So we didn't have platforms and all those kind of things. It was individual web pages that people had. And it was still hard to get to the internet. So the way that we wrote research papers and how we did things is my professors would write, and my undergrad was in engineering, chemical engineering. And I did sociology too, so I understand about the social sciences. So the professors would either lecture and then you'd write those things down, or they'd write on the chalkboard and you write all that stuff down. My hand would be super sore at the end of the day because I'd be writing so much more. Now, much of that has not changed in any sort of way. What has changed is the access to the information on the internet, but also that we're getting to a stage where we are having algorithms that are being almost as good as us at doing many of the things that we're doing. Now, what can we do as human beings as we're entering this stage, right? So remember, I'm a professor of innovation. I think, in my own personal view, is one way that we could say is do what we do with not seatbelts, with distraction driving laws and all those kind of things, is prohibit and ban and do regulate and all that kind of stuff, prevent all that stuff as much as we possibly can before it overtakes us. Here's the problem with that though, is that we can do it in our location, right? You often see this, our location. And the problem is the rest of the world is not going to do that. There's always going to be countries and locations that are not going to abide by any of that stuff. And they're going to say, screw it, we're just going to keep going. Or we don't have any laws and all those kind of things. And we're just going to keep evolving with some of these things, right? So there is going to be people that are going to try to constrain a lot of this kind of stuff to control it. The problem is we can't control it. We're at a stage that all of this is going to keep going very, very quickly. It's very hard to control any of these kind of things. It's like when you see environmental pollution rules in terms of the international body, they work, but they don't quite work. There's always cheaters out there, and we have to kind of overlook them, right, in terms of what's going to happen. Here's the problem, is that it's going to be really hard to do that with any sort of information that's out there, and we're going to have a hard time preventing that, because it's one thing if it's in in sort of a location to prevent this stuff from happening or to ignore that stuff from happening, but when it's diffused across the internet, super hard to prevent any of the stuff that's happening. There was this music app many years ago called Napster, and people tried to prevent this the sharing of music online. And what the problem was, and they were able to kind of slow it down for about a second, but literally it was 6 months later that there was a bunch of, it was called Pirate Bay, and all these kind of sketchy websites were sharing all this information and music and stuff once Napster was eliminated from the scene. They were basically shut down Napster. And then we had all of these other amazing applications come up that were able to monetize this in a better way, like iTunes, like Spotify and Pandora, and all these amazing kind of apps. So we can't prevent any of this stuff from happening, is what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that we can't shape it in the way that we would love to do, and that's where we have to think about, like, how are we going to be involved in this discussion. So I'm building the Reciprocity Project because I think that if we had something that was legitimate, that was out in the open, and that, you know, we can sort of control some of these things, and then people can use this, it would be a lot more useful for everybody, and it's legitimate. Like, I'm going to try to abide by as many things as possible and be open and be, you know, like, make sure that everybody is well aware of what I'm trying to do, right? Like, it's not going to be some sketchy overseas kind of thing where, you know, and I'm not like knocking overseas, but generally they're from countries that are not, you know, that people are there's less laws in those particular locations. But, you know, I want to create something that is going to be out in the open and legitimate, and everybody's going to sort of realize that this thing is legitimate. So, you know, what do we have to do in this circumstance? Well, I think we have to be out in the open, and we have to realize what we're trying to do, but then as well put in a bunch of sort of controls and things like that to make sure that all of this is kind of playing by what would be really, you know, customary and those kind of things. But the other thing to realize is that, you know, a lot of this we can't stop. And so what we have to do is, as instructors and professors and all those kind of folks, we have to realize it's not going to stop. And we have to change ourselves, and we have to think about, like, okay, how are we going to create a world in terms of, you know, none of this stuff is ever going to stop. There's going to be, like, not people doing the right thing at this moment. So how do we do this? Well, we can lean into it more than what we actually do, and really, really push at some of these areas, right? So instead of, like, negating, you know, the machine learning or writing of text and things like that are happening, we can simply say, wait a minute, you can use all those tools if you want to, but you have to double check all of this kind of stuff and make sure it's actually working. But my expectation is going to be that much higher if you actually use it, right? So all of that kind of stuff you can think about, and how to leverage some of these things in a different way. We just have to be a little creative. The world is not going back to the way it used to be, is what I'm saying. And we have to be a lot more creative and think about things in many different ways. Part of, you know, me going onto YouTube and all that kind of stuff and being social is recognizing, wait a minute, the world has changed, right? Like, me teaching in a university is one part of my life, but me telling you about the story of what it's like to teach in the university and to do research and all those kind of things, wait a minute, that's an amazing opportunity for all of us to see what's going on. And as I'm building the whole Reciprocity Project, you get to see, like, wait a minute, that's what real innovation is about. It's slow, it's tedious, you make a lot of mistakes, all of those kind of things. Like, what a wonderful experience for everybody to see in terms of what's going on. So there's nothing hidden and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, how do we actually do this? I'm going to run into things where I'm going to feel like upset about myself all the time. All of that kind of stuff is very real with the process. And I want to be open so you could see, like, this is what it's like. And then, as a consequence, maybe some of you might actually, you're going to learn something. That's cool. I love that. And then, the B, or number two, maybe what you'll end up doing is saying, hey, wait a minute, I want to go and say hi to this Professor Maslach guy and come to his class, or, do these kind of things. Maybe. I mean, that's my long-term goal. If that ever gets there, I don't know. But the other thing is, it's just really fun. You have to embrace some of these things because you got to realize that the world has changed, and for the better, right? Like, all of this stuff is making our life better. Why do we have to go back to writing cursive? That's gone. That's never going to come back, unless it's sort of a stylized way to sort of understand the world. Going back to the printing press, like the original printing press, that's gone. we're never going back to those things. So we have to think about what it means to go forward. And a lot of that is a lot more trickier than what we think. And part of it has to acknowledge that, wait a minute, I don't know everything. And why not open it out to the world and see what they think about it? All right. So hopefully you learned a little bit, and thanks so much for following along. All right. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.